You are listening to the Business Leadership Podcast with Edwin Frondozo.
Your equity is, for founders, your equity is the most finite and valuable resource that you have at your disposal, alongside the ideas that you have for your business. And so when it comes to managing your cap table or thinking about what the future holds, the sooner you have your cap table built out on a platform like Mantle Equity, the sooner you can start focusing on the other elements of your business and how you're going to impact them. For a limited time, we offer the first year free. It's $100 a month after that with unlimited stakeholders. If you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us at withmantle.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Biz Leader. Welcome to another episode of the Business Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Edwin Frondozo, and today we are featuring a special episode from our Future Narrator mini-series recorded live at the Collision Conference in Toronto, Canada. In this series, we explore the future of leadership, innovation, and storytelling with visionary leaders who are not just designing products, but are creating entire new worlds and markets. Joining me is Dr. Paul Newton, and together we'll be speaking with Jarrett Quan-Hin, the co-founder and head of product at Mantle. In our conversation, Jarrett will discuss how Mantle seeks to revolutionize how founders and companies manage their equity. We'll delve into the inherent complexities of cap tables, the common errors and discrepancies that arise, and how Mantle provides a more integrated, forward-looking solution. So without further ado, here we go. Now speaking with Jarrett Quan-Hin, co-founder of Mantle. Jarrett, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Evan. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us today. Really excited. I guess jumping right in, Jarrett, I'd love it if you could share what problem is Mantle solving when it comes to founders who are running their companies.
We're building Mantle Equity, and what we want to do is change the way that founders and companies think about how they understand, manage, and plan around one of their most precious resources, a finite resource, which is their equity. That starts and ends with the cap table. What we've seen is this growing disconnect on how companies think about and reason with their cap tables that stems from a number of different factors. Essentially, all of the cap table, or the entire cap table, is built off of this compilation of legal documents, corporate filings, board consents, and there's a lot of complexity in those documents that gets extracted and put onto a cap table. But all of these platforms that are built to capture the information don't place enough focus on maintaining a tight link between those documents and the information that they've pulled out and set onto the platform. And then the other piece is that they tend to look more as a backwards-looking repository of that information to say what's happened. And so what we're seeing is when founders, their CFOs, their lawyers are looking to start planning around the future of the company, whether it's a hiring round, a priced round financing, they're extracting or exporting the information into a spreadsheet, starting to play around with it. The potential for that reality to start spidering off and for errors to get introduced ends up making its way in to the point where either at the point where they're planning what moves they want to make, or when they've made those changes and are pulling them back into the platform, they realize that what they thought they were going to be doing doesn't match up with what the reality ended up being. And so we're seeking to change that for founders.
That's very interesting. And I'm a founder as well, partner in different things. And I imagine, and from your experience, Jarrett, a lot of this also starts with the lack of knowledge of what a cap table is as first-time entrepreneurs, because we come in as idea problem solvers. We don't even know much about this.
Yeah, 100%.
So what do you see when it comes to your platform? Is it educating from the start, or are you typically working when the cap table is already formed or some sort of cap table is formed?
Yeah, it's been a large mix. We're dealing with, new growth companies that are part of partnerships that we have with accelerators or incubators, where it's exactly that. They're people that have an idea, they want to make it a reality, and the aspect of the cap table is just a secondary thought. And so when a band gets a record deal, whatever offers come to the table, they're chomping at the bit to get at them. But my co-founder, Dwayne, early on, he was talking about how equity is like a roll of toilet paper, and that when you have a fresh roll, you're doling it out and you're being real fast and loose with how many squares you're using. And then as you start to get towards the end, you're like, oh, I was not thinking about how I'm using this resource. It's finite. You can raise another round, but you're only going to be able to have 100% of your cap table on the chart at any one time. And so needing to be very conscious up front and feeling knowledgeable about what that is that you're spending and how you're using it between hiring, finding advisors, finding investors that can help you out. It's an invaluable tool that the more we can empower founders to utilize and think about that properly, the better the entire product ecosystem is going to wind up being.
Yeah, you mentioned when it comes to the cap table, there's a lot of stakeholders involved. You mentioned the lawyers, the CFOs, some third-party processors, or not processors, but platforms. And I'm sure with that comes with a number of different platforms. And when it's time to leverage a platform like Mantle, it is this historic view. Do you find that they have to redo anything before they move forward? Is that what happens a lot?
Very often. So usually a price round financing in particular tends to be this point at which there's a lot of focus on the cap table. And so whether you are counsel as a lawyer representing the company that's being invested in or investor counsel, there's this process of due diligence and looking to tie out, as it's called, the cap table and basically take a look at document by document and justifying all the numbers that they're seeing. And when it's underneath that microscope, there are very often aspects of it that can wind up being incorrect, like option grants that didn't necessarily get the right board approval, valuations on the exercise price or exercise prices that don't align to the latest valuation of the company. And there's all these different aspects that leak their way in over time and then all appear at that very concentrated point of focus when the founder is under a lot of stress and they're being told, hey, there are issues with your cap table that stem back like 1 or 2 years. And so a big part of what we're doing at Mantle is building out an AI-powered onboarding process in which we are looking at the raw documents, extracting the key information, and then presenting it in a way that not only can they very quickly see what their cap table is going to become, they can see line by line in the documents where we're extracting that information and have that validation take place right up front. And not only are they onboarding onto a platform where they can continue to manage their equity, they're getting a health check at the same time that can then be flagged to lawyers or to an accountant in order to review and decide what the next steps are.
And I imagine with the implementation or the leverage of AI, it's an eye-opening situation for the founders. But as you said, it really helps them move faster, quicker. When it comes to AI, and aside from the onboarding, where else are you seeing this technology being leveraged or being empowered or revolutionizing this part of the process?
Yeah, I think in particular for us, the very generative aspects of AI aren't as much of our focus. Hey, make me a pitch deck as an example. Fantastic use cases, but for the area of the world where we're nerding out right now, there is much more of a focus on how are we able to quickly synthesize data and present it back to someone so that they can quickly understand it and make the most of it. And so whether that is information about their cap table, information about the industry in general, and saying, hey, if I'm looking to hire an advisor, what are the general equity percentages that I should be offering? Or even if it's just understanding to like the point we were discussing earlier, what do I do with an option pool, or what's pari passu mean, and things like that, like providing an educational aspect to it as well so that people aren't dealing with this in the dark and just roaming around blindly. They can feel acknowledged and empowered about what decisions they're going to with that.
As you were talking, Jarrett, it's amazing. You could almost ask your platform, explain it like I'm 5, what I have here, and what does this mean? I'm actually looking to bring in another partner, and how could that look?
Yeah.
Or even engaging with third parties and your advisors.
Yep, exactly. And I will stress that we're not going to replace lawyers. Their knowledge about what should be done and how things should be done properly is absolutely invaluable. But that first level passive conversation that you would normally have with a mentor or something like that is something that if you don't have access to that resource in the moment, or you're up at night at 2 a.m. worrying about this sort of stuff, there's something or someone that's always around to assist you on that front.
That's great. Aside from AI, and obviously AI is the big thing this last couple of years, are you seeing any other major disruptions within this industry or within this space?
Yeah, there's been interesting market shifts at large. There's a combination of companies deciding to stay private for longer, like delaying those IPOs or just never having a plan to IPO. And that is resulting in private companies that have way more complexity and history to them than there used to be around like secondary transfers and things like that, tying into like their Series C's, D's, E's, and beyond. The other aspect is we're also starting to see more companies that are opting to bootstrap their own resources rather than seeking out that seed funding early on. And so there's a lot of kind of democratization around how companies are choosing to start themselves up and continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fixed playbook anymore around like you approach investors, get your seed funding, hit a Series A, hit a Series B, and then look to IPO. sometime in like that future, like in the coming years after that.
And this might be a bit of a tangent, Jared, but that's amazing. I appreciate you sharing. But I imagine the use cases that your platform tied in with trained of a large language models. I imagine that you have a good data set, or you can have a good data set of all the almost limitless types of ways to structure a deal now too, as well, which a lot of founders out there may never know until the mentor tells them or an advisor tells them. But there could be something there. I'm not sure if that's able to get out there, but just in terms of having that knowledge for the founders, like, oh, you know what, these are your options. And of course, there's different ways to look at things.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ways to aggregate and anonymize that data in order to provide an impartial view of the world and present it as such. We've also implemented capabilities like term sheet summarizers and modelers that, if you are in the fortunate position of being approached by an investor with a term sheet, you can drag and drop it into your cap table and we'll project what that's going to look like. If you need to understand what each of the different terms are, you can. If you want to start playing around with, they're saying, hey, let's do a 15% option pool top up, and you want to see like, how can I drive that lower?
Yeah.
You can then start tying that into forecasting models for your hiring plans and then prove to them with visuals and data on here's who I'm looking to hire in order to last me the next 5 years before we do another raise. I don't think we're going to need 15% and we're going to need to dilute ourselves that far in order to have the spending power of our equity necessary in order to pull that off.
Exactly. And that's just great because like we mentioned in the past, we might have just been pulling this out of our ass, out of our behinds before, right? Like just to figure it out, let's do 15 points. Let's go there.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a lot of that sense of feeling like the investor that's coming in is putting money and resources on the table, knowing how or what the right ways to approach continuing that discussion and negotiation, which it ultimately is at the end of the day, is something that we want to provide founders with.
That's great. Something that I took note of over the last couple of years, and I know from your founding story about the blockchain, I'm curious when it comes to the NFTs and the ownerships, what do you see the future is for company ownership?
Yeah, great question. The fact that at the end of the day, a cap table is the summary of a whole bunch of paper documents means that maybe we're not quite ready just yet for immutable records of what the cap table was, because there's all sorts of things that end up happening with legal docs, like revisions and things like that. And when you're looking at chains like first-party chains like Ethereum, but the costs in order to edit or amend those records can be pretty substantial.
Yeah.
But I think as we start to get into a world in which we have a tighter coupling between those underlying documents and how that data has then turned into key value pairs on a system, the more ready we're going to be for having those types of systems in place that are going to allow non-objective third parties or additional providers to be able to tap into that information and utilize it for facilitating secondary rounds, facilitating payroll, things like that. Just like additional ways of accessing cap table data that so many different folks in the ecosystem utilize in different ways in as simple a format that they can readily run with as possible.
That's great. And that stuff, I remember when I first started reading about the NFT space and ownership and giving ownership to your first purchasers, I thought that was just fascinating, but it was just like, all right, that's way beyond my concept right now. When it comes to this podcast, I am always interested in terms of business leadership, how people are growing, what things they're working on. I guess just personally, Jarrett, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing today?
One of them is, to my point just now, there are so many different personas that end up touching a cap table, and they all have different needs and ways that they're thinking about it. And traditionally, one of the most underserved ones are the law firms that are helping these companies manage their equity and just the company structure in general. They usually wind up being the power users of these platforms, but have also traditionally not been the ones paying for it. And therefore, a lot of their use cases and workflows don't necessarily take priority against what a founder's asking for as far as how they think about cap tables. And we're trying to keep an eye out for where we're best suited to be able to help out different personas, and also where there's the opportunity for ecosystem partners to come in and take over for other elements of it. And so we've actually been very lucky to join the Open Cap Table Coalition, which is essentially a consortium of ecosystem players, so law firms, payroll management systems, secondary market providers, and things like that, to look to build towards a consolidated or unified data model that we can then transmit cap table related information. And so we don't necessarily need to be everything to everyone. We can choose what areas that we play in and then have ties to partners that are using the same data structure in order to quickly facilitate transactions or other types of items that a company is going to be running on the day-to-day.
And through that consortium, it's a good place to be and start situating to really answer those challenges. I know you sit as head of product and a co-founder as well. With these challenges and looking into the future, like how do you plan and you lead to the future for your employees, your teams, your stakeholders, your customers? Is there anything specific that you're doing as you're leading them there?
Yeah, we pride ourselves on being a very dog food heavy organization. And so not only, say, as we're hiring engineers, are we having them make their first code commits in the first week or even the first day, we're also having them onboard companies at the same time. And so there's a lot of time spent in the platform by everybody, understanding what the pains of either onboarding or using the platform end up being, what sort of thought process they have or that the founders have as they're going through it in order to understand everything that's going on, and just building a lot of that empathy. And I think what that does is help give us a pulse on where the industry's headed, what types of ideas or areas we're best positioned to be able to help these founders out. And that's just something that we're going to continue to do for the foreseeable future.
No, I love that. What was the term you said at the beginning?
Dog fooding.
Dog fooding.
Yeah, I believe Paul Moritz, when he was at either at Windows, I think it was at Windows, believe he coined it. The idea of if you're making dog food, you should be eating the dog food in order to check the quality. Same kind of idea with products in the tech space, right? The more you're using your product, the better you're understanding what it's actually like to be a user and empathize with where they're coming from.
That's perfect. Thanks for sharing that. Jarrett, I'm just curious if you could share the vision. What is your vision of the future you are building?
Yeah, we want to be able to empower founders and operators of businesses to truly understand and utilize that finite resource of equity that has traditionally been underutilized, we feel. And so by giving them the tools to understand what the value of it is, allow them to quickly and efficiently plan around how to spend it, we're envisioning a world in which not only can companies execute on their product and gain a lot of time back because they don't have all this mental baggage sitting in their head about who owns what and how are they going to keep their investors happy. It's all parked in Mantle and they're happy with it being there. They can then worry less about that aspect and just really focus on the execution.
It sounds like you turned the whole thing around cap tables into a tool for telling a better story about your company, and giving them options for stories they can tell depending on who they're talking to.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what do you think becomes possible for founders as their ability to really back up their story with data? Like what becomes possible?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities there, whether it's the forensic aspect of understanding what changes underwent or came through the cap table over time, or even just saying, hey, look at our retention with our employees. Here we can see we're able to very clearly tell the story on how their equity is growing as the company's continuing to grow and aligning a lot of those incentives between employee and employer on building out a product that's going to be able to deliver value for everybody involved long term.
Yeah, because really when it comes to getting investment, talking to VCs and all that, the story that your data tells and how you really embrace it as the person pitching or the founder, that has a bigger impact than just data.
Yeah, 100%. I think making a good impression with investors is so crucial. And when there are platforms already allowing you to tee up that data to be as presentable as possible right off the bat, you're not sweating those particular slides on your pitch deck or your talk with that investor. You can focus specifically on the value prop that your individual business has and really nailing that in order to get them to buy in on the vision of what you're building, as well as how you as a company have been built out.
And so what do you think that founders need to develop around that area in terms of how they tell the story of their data?
Great question. I think a lot of it ends up being around having a tight understanding of where they're playing, where their strengths are, and how they're essentially looking to bring a novel position to if they're entering an existing market where they're going to be changing the scene. There's that breakdown on where are you disrupting versus disrupting. I can't remember what the other one is. My apologies. But the level of ingenuity, or are you changing the way that the market thinks about this product space that you're entering? Are you providing a better product and you're still operating in the same general area? just allowing them to tell the necessary story in order to buy in on the vision that you have.
It's cool because you're enabling them to make bold statements and then go, look, I'm not just pulling this out of my butt, sir.
Yeah. Like if these are the types of valuations that we're seeing in a general industry, like how are we justifying where we at or where we measure up against the competition in those regards?
Jarrett, it's been great, but before we let you go, I'd love to get some final thoughts, a recommendation, or any advice for the founders, business leaders who may be listening today.
Yeah, I'll repeat because it's a very important point. Your equity is, for founders, your equity is the most finite and valuable resource that you have at your disposal alongside the ideas that you have for your business. And so when it comes to managing your cap table or thinking about what the future holds, the sooner you have your cap table built out on a platform like Mantle Equity, the sooner you can start focusing on the other elements of your business and how you're going to impact them. For a limited time, we have an offer available of the first year free. It's $100 a month after that with unlimited stakeholders because we want to see this ecosystem grow. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us at withmantle.com. We're also partnering with incubators, accelerator centers, and law firms as well. And so to anybody in those sectors that are interested in partnering with us, we'd love to see how we can help you out as well. You can also reach us through the same website, withmantle.com.
Jarrett, it's been an amazing time. Thank you for joining us on the Business Leadership Podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's it, biz leaders. Thank you for joining me on this special episode of the Business Leadership Podcast, part of our feature narrator miniseries recorded at the Collision Conference. This was a very insightful conversation for me as Jarrett Quan-Hin explored how Mantle is transforming equity management for founders and companies. So for links to all the resources we discussed, to connect with Jarrett, and to learn more about the Future Narrator Project, please do slide into the show notes into the app that you're listening to right now. And if you are interested in reading more about Jarrett and other business leaders that we profiled at Collision, join the waitlist for our upcoming book. And by the way, if you found value in listening to this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it with the very first person who comes to mind that could benefit from hearing about founder equity and would be uber grateful from hearing from you. Your support helps us grow and empowers us to create more great content for you. So thank you for tuning in, being a part of the business leadership community. Until next time, have a 100x day.